This is the Ambition and Life podcast, where we challenge the status quo, rethink leadership, and reimagine work for the world we actually live in. I'm your host, Karis Dorrigan, product leader, solo parent, and advocate for systems that work better for everyone. Each episode, you'll hear real stories and practical strategies from leaders, parents, and changemakers, building a future where ambition and care can thrive together, because the future of work is flexible, human, and values-led. And it starts right here. My guest today is Jessica Graham, Marketing Director at The Search Experience and a Senior Leader reimagining what leadership, growth, and the work-life rhythm can look like. Jessica brings a big career and an even bigger perspective, with deep expertise across MarTech, data, and recruitment. She's worked in enterprise environments and now leads marketing at a US-based startup that's reshaping the recruitment industry from the inside out. Jessica is a powerhouse, but what makes Jessica's story so powerful is how she works. She's designed a career on her own terms, one that honors her ambition and her life. She's a parent, podcaster, and bookworm, and someone who's faced adversity with honesty and optimism. In this conversation, we explore leadership, flexible work patterns that support a flourishing life, and what part-time really means when you're all in on impact. Jessica also shares how she's navigated redundancy with clarity and courage, and how sometimes a pause becomes a push you need to create something better. Let's dive right in. Welcome to Ambition and Life, Jessica. I'm so excited to have you here. Let's start by painting a picture for our listeners about Jessica, both in and outside work. Who are you and what lights you up?
Well, thanks for having me, Karis. I'm happy to be here as well, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Who is Jessica Graham? Well, you'd think that would be an easy thing to answer, but I guess it depends on who I'm talking to. I would say I wear a couple of different hats. So in my professional life, I'm a marketer with over 15 years experience working in that B2B space that you mentioned. And for the past 10 years, I worked for a big accounting firm. And in April of this year, as you also alluded to, I made the switch to the Search Experience, which is based in San Francisco, still in recruitment, but with a completely different business model. We work with startups helping to build out their GTM and tech teams, and I head up their marketing team. So that's the blurb I'd give you if you met me at a networking event. But if you met me at a school pickup, I'd introduce myself as a mum of two crazy boys under 8. If you dug a bit further, I'd tell you that I come from a big family. I'm the youngest girl in a family of 10 kids. And then lastly, if you came across me on Reddit or perhaps on my way back from the library, I'd tell you I'm a big bookworm, so much so that my friend and I have just started a side gig as co-hosts of the Book Trivia podcast.
What does ambition mean to you now?
If you'd asked me this before I had kids, I would have said I wanted my boss's job. I wanted to be the CEO. I want to not only smash the glass ceiling, but hijack one of Elon Musk's rockets and sail that baby up through the glass and land it on the moon. But post-kids, it's definitely a different story for me. So I still want recognition at work, and I work damn hard to warrant that reward. But what's more important to me now, it's being able to spend more time with my kids when they're still young. I don't want to look back when I'm 80 and regret all the milestones I missed because I was on a call talking about privacy and compliance. As you know, I also have elderly parents with health issues, so I want to be able to spend whatever time I have left spending quality time with them too. Have you heard that poem? It starts off something like, I'm 80 years old and somehow I wake up in my 38-year-old body just for one day. And it's basically about someone imagining they're 80 years old and they suddenly get dropped back into their 38-year-old body for a day. And at first they notice how hectic, I can see you're nodding, and then pressured that stage of life felt. The kids are still little, always having to rush to get them ready and get them to school, get them to work, etc. But because they've already lived through it, they know what actually matters now. So instead of stressing, they slow down, they stop putting importance on the work and the expectations, and instead they choose to hang out with their kids, focus on having fun, let work fit around life instead of running it. And then by the end of the day, they feel at peace, like they finally lived it the way they wish they had the first time round. So I know I can't always do that, but I do have that in the back of my mind. When my littlest says to me he wants an extra hug, I try and stop and be in that moment instead of thinking about what that work email is that I need to send urgently, because once this time is gone, I'm never going to be able to get it back with them.
Yeah, I love that. I'm sure you've heard of that sandwich generation where you've got the young kids and elderly parents, and it sounds like you're really in the middle of that. Before we dive into what you're doing now, I want to pause on something that so many are facing at the moment: redundancy. You were made redundant after a decade in your previous role, and it became a really big catalyst for change. So, can you talk us through that moment and what mindset you brought?
It was the funniest thing. I was on a work call and I saw this meeting pop up in my calendar, and it had the VP of marketing and HR in 30 minutes time. And I thought, oh, okay, this is weird. I messaged my boss and I asked her if I needed to prep anything for the call, but I got crickets. So I didn't think much of it, but I jumped on the call. And as soon as I got on the call and I sensed the mood, I was like, whoa, this ain't good. I even said, this ain't good. And I was messaging my husband saying, I think I'm getting made redundant. Like I was actually laughing. It was so surreal.
Talk us through what made that hard, what helped you in that moment, and what you started to think about in terms of what's next.
In terms of mindset, I'll be honest, I think I was the happiest person they'd ever made redundant. I'd been bored in the job for quite a while, and the role had become more caretaker than strategic because they had been gradually moving all their marketing opportunities to be centralized into their US head office anyway. And I had been staying there because I loved my managers and because I loved the APAC team that I managed. So on the one hand, of course, I was sad, but I'm also a really big believer that everything happens for a reason. I think I was super lucky that I just didn't feel all that upset about it. If anything, it felt like they were giving me this beautiful gift. Like it was a package for me to take a nice break after 10 years of solid work. And they gave me a buffer so that I could look for something I really loved instead of just panicking and choosing any job to make ends meet. And then on the other hand too, I guess what helped in that moment was my direct managers also got made redundant with me. And they were a major reason I was staying. So the fact that they were out too, it didn't really leave me with much reason to want to stay anyway. And I guess it also took the personal factor out of it for me, because the people who were making me redundant hadn't worked with me or understood my role. So it wasn't like they were making me redundant. Like they really didn't understand what I did day to day. Whereas if they had talked to my managers instead of making them redundant, they would have realized the value that I was bringing to the role as well. So
yeah, that's a great tip, right? Because I'm sure that is the case in so many instances, yet I'm sure a lot of people really do take that personally when actually, unfortunately, in these times, it is just that business decision. As you said, it was a bit of a positive for you, particularly in terms of where you're at. So it's kind of pushed you into probably what you would have done anyway. When you start to think about that, what was next for you? What were some of the must-haves and non-negotiables that started to come to you in terms of your search for what's next?
So my biggest non-negotiable was that I wanted to have a 4-day work week because I wanted to spend more time with my mum. And then also, as I mentioned, like still spending time with my littlest before he goes to school, because he's turning 4 in this week, actually. You can never get back that time with your kids when they're that tiny. So I really want to make the most of it while I can, while he's not, thinking I'm the worst mum in the world for making him do homework.
Soon, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then my other must have in terms of flexibility was working from home at least 3 days a week. And of course, the other end of that is that I wanted my salary to be commensurate to my skills and what I bring to any role as well. So those were the top 3.
Now you're at the search experience, leading marketing at a very senior level and doing it in 4 days on a rhythm that works for your life. Can you describe for our listeners what that actually looks like for you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm doing a 4-day work week, and I have the Thursdays off because that coincides with my childcare days. And then because the search experience is based out of San Francisco, I start work earlier so I can have more time within their core hours. So most days I start at 7 a.m. and finish at 3 p.m., which is awesome.
Great. And how does that rhythm support you beyond work as a parent and as someone with interests as a human?
So the hours are so cool. They're really good as a human. I'm definitely a morning person, so it really suits me to be able to start early and finish early in those US hours. And it not only helps me stay focused during work hours, but in personal terms, being able to finish at 3. And as a mum, 3 p.m., that's like the time that you need to go pick up the kids. So when they get home, I can help with homework, I do the dinners, etc. And I'm not feeling stressed that I need to be back online for that.
Yeah, so interesting. I hadn't really thought about that sort of US time zone working so well in terms of remote work and the hours and the schedules that we as parents have this side of the world. And so it's not common to see flexible leadership roles, especially ones with real boundaries. So I'm really curious, how did you negotiate that?
So the truth is I had applied for quite a few roles and I'd actually been offered 4 different jobs by that stage. So of those, it was between the search experience and one other job that I was seriously tossing up between. And I think that the fact that I had the other role was quite a good bargaining chip I was able to use within the negotiations. The truth is the other job was pretty compelling as well, and they were based in Sydney, and they were actually both able to come to the table with what I wanted. So I was like, oh, okay, I can get this either way. But in the end, I really felt like TSC was the better fit for me in terms of the culture and also the managers.
When you do have more options, it makes you bolder sometimes in terms of negotiation. It's really good to understand that context. And, it can be hard to say you're a 4-day work person, but actually potentially end up working all of the hours. So I'm really keen to understand what you do to protect that week to week and really make sure that 4 days doesn't become 5.
And it's actually very topical because I recently had to have a call with my managers and talk through expectations. We when I first came on board, we'd put some loose marketing goals in place, and I realized they were a bit too ambitious. Well, it wasn't actually them. Like, it was me. I was like, oh, I can probably do all this. And then when it came down to it, I was like, actually, I'm not going to be able to. So I just set up a time to take them through, like, a call to revise my original marketing goals. And on that call, I went through what I see as the top priorities from a strategic marketing point of view. And then I put it against what my realistic capacity is within that 4-day week. And then it was really great. It was very, like, we kind of went back and forth a bit and we were able to come to a good compromise that's still ambitious, but it's also achievable in the hours that I have available to me. So I'm not freaking out every time I get online to try and, get everything done.
Yeah, totally. That's really great. Really practical tip in how people can manage expectations and their time. And what advice would you give to leaders designing roles that provide different flexible options and individuals advocating for a new pattern of work?
So if you are hiring, my biggest advice is to keep an open mind. I know a lot of leaders get really rigid about what they want. Like, this has to be full time. It needs to be in the office 5 days a week. The truth is, you do that, you end up shutting out some amazing people that way. And I'll give you an example. I don't know.
Please do. 2 people right on the call.
Yeah, exactly. In all honesty, I didn't even bother applying for roles that were advertised full-time in the office. But if I'd actually sat down with some of those companies, I know I would have knocked their socks off in the interview and they would have hired me straight away with the flexibility that I wanted, because I would have got what they needed to get done within the hours that I need to work in. So they just never got the chance because their role was framed too narrowly that I would never do it. I think a good way to flip it is to ask yourself, what would I, as a hiring manager, offer to keep an awesome hire if they were already on my team? Maybe it's flexibility, maybe it's hybrid work or a slightly different shape of, to the role. If you're willing to offer it to keep someone who's great, you should probably be willing to offer it upfront to attract someone great too. That's how you widen your pool and you land the best.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really great way for people to check in if they're being open enough in terms of what they're looking for. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about part-time, because we're discussing this offline and we had a bit of a chuckle together, because the label often doesn't reflect the impact and the truth that you really are still achieving those outcomes of a 5-day work week. So you're in a significant leadership role. We've discussed it's flexible, it's impactful, and technically it's part-time. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we define full-time versus part-time and how should we reframe this?
So first off, I'm still insulted that you think I'm part-time. I'm more full-time than part-time. I'm working 4 out of 5 days. But let's get real about it. Honestly, who decided a 4-day week is part-time in the first place? That feels like such an old school way of looking at work. In some countries like Finland, 4 days is already considered full-time. I don't think we should be putting rigid labels on anything anymore. This is the outcomes, the value someone's delivering, and not whether they're sitting at a desk 5 days a week.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I certainly have never thought of myself as a part-time worker, but Yeah, I think it's an
Yeah.
really interesting conversation. And I love that you lump that into, okay, well, actually, if we're thinking of 4 days as part-time, that is actually an old traditional mindset that we need to check ourselves on and as leaders really challenge that. And if we did reframe and, really think 4 days is 5 days and it's permanent, it's a full-time capacity, what do you think that could unlock for women, for parents, or anyone seeking additional ambition and balance in their lives?
If we reframe it, the whole conversation shifts. Instead of asking, is 4 days full time actually full time or part time, you start asking, what does the business need? How do we design the roles that deliver on that and still be sustainable for people? That takes the focus away from old labels, hours, and it puts it on outcomes and impact. Suddenly, it's not about policing time, it's about creating roles that attract and retain top talent, and it lets people work in a way that they can actually perform at their best.
You're not just reimagining work, you're reimagining how marketing works. At the search experience, you're embedding AI in a meaningful way, building tools and rhythms that challenge the status quo. What are you working on right now that really excites you?
I'm loving the variety of work I'm doing for TSC at the moment. We're working on an updated AEO. I've spoken to you about this, SEO and AEO optimized website. We're building out a new founder experience Slack community, and we're also on social media and other targeted PR opportunities. And I love that the business is hyper-focused on recruitment for early stage startups, because my previous role was a lot more generic recruitment. And with TSC, I'm really able to be that hyper-focused on our target audience and my marketing message.
Awesome. And where do you think the future of marketing is headed, particularly in this age of automation and AI?
I think a lot of people are scared of AI, but honestly, I think it's making marketing exciting again. It's like when the internet first came along and people were scared because it completely reshaped businesses. And yes, a lot of jobs did disappear, but then entirely new industries and careers popped up in their place. And I think we'll see the same thing happen with AI. And for marketers in particular, this is a new frontier. For too long, Google has this dictatorship in paid search marketing. They dictated where the marketing dollars were spent and how people found information. And now with answer engines like Perplexity and ChatGPT starting to take a real bite out of that empire, I think the smart marketers are making strategic plans in AEO and GEO, as I mentioned to you. They're figuring out how to make their brands visible in those new environments where people don't just search, they expect direct, natural answers. So to me, that's the exciting part. We're not just optimizing for clicks anymore. We're shaping up how brands show up in a whole new discovery ecosystem.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like we could have a whole podcast episode just on this conversation. But yeah, super, super interesting. And I certainly agree in my area, more in the product management side. That excitement and that ability to be learning new things that we haven't been able to in quite some time is absolutely can understand the anxiety, but also if we can lean into learning, what a great opportunity. So let's get practical, because I do want this podcast to be not just stories, but strategies. And you've actually given us some really good advice through our conversation, but let's just go through a couple more tips for our audience. What is one practical strategy or tool that you believe leaders and organizations can do to make space for ambition and life to coexist?
Honestly, the most practical thing leaders can do is build flexibility into roles from the start. Don't make it a thing that people have to beg for to earn after years of being there. Just set it up as the default. So what that might look like is offering a 4-day work week option, hybrid work, or even just having clear core hours and giving people freedom outside of that. It's basically saying we trust you to get the job done, and we also get that you have a life. And it's part of the reason I didn't make a move from my old job for 10 years, because I felt like I had earned that flexibility that I was being given, and I didn't realize that I could work somewhere else and get that same deal, and in fact something even better. So if you're an employer and you give your people an environment where they don't have to choose between being ambitious at work and actually living their life, that's when you're going to attract those really great performers, as I mentioned.
Yeah, so interesting. That really resonates, the fact that you feel like you've got to earn it. And I think a lot of parents feel like when they come back or they're a first-time parent, it's all about earning them, potentially staying in roles for longer because, it's this new phase of life. So if it's not something you earn, but something that is part of role design and organizational design, I think I 100% agree that can really shift things. So what about parents, caregivers, or anyone designing a rhythm that works? Any other tips for those individuals more so than leaders?
For parents and caregivers, or really anyone, it's about creating a pace that lets you show up fully at work and at home. So maybe that's blocking school pickup in your calendar and building work around it. Maybe it's starting later and finishing later. It doesn't mean that you're doing less. It means you're working in a way that lets you show up with more energy and focus. And the bottom line is that if you're happy, then that's going to show up in your performance at work as well.
Yeah, totally. I've heard a lot recently actually about energy and, you spoke earlier around the early hours work for you because that's when you're your best, right? So I think it's something really interesting our listeners to reflect on how they work best. And what about leaders wanting to unlock performance and flexibility in their teams?
The key is trusting your team. You hired them for a reason. They obviously know how to do their jobs, so don't babysit them. Our main aim as managers should be to set clear goals, be super transparent on what success looks like, and then just give our guys the freedom to get there in a way that works for them. So for an example is one of my team members had family in China. We allowed her to go to China, work from there, spend time with her elderly parents. We trusted her to get on with her job while she was there, and surprise, surprise, she actually did. And then something else I was going to mention, which you already did, but another example is whenever I hire a new person, I tell them these are our core hours. But if you're a morning person and you want to start early, or vice versa, start late, finish late, then by all means do. Just all I ask as a manager is tell me the hours that you want and then stick to them. So don't be saying I want to come in at 9 and work till 6, but then swap it around. Like be consistent with that. I'm a really big believer in focusing on those outcomes instead of the processes because people need to feel trusted. I'm sure you feel the same in your life. When you feel trusted, you feel like, yes, I'm going to step up. You get higher performance and more loyalty with a team that isn't burning out as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? And everyone's so different. And, there's so much different people, generations in the workforce. So it really is giving trust and expecting that trust to come back. I think when we speak about, well, if you ask for something, be committed to sticking to it and showing that consistency. So you've got that two-way partnership. I think it's been a really rich conversation. So thank you for all your thoughts and advice for our listeners. And if you reflect on what we've spoken about today, what is one piece of advice you want to impart on our listeners from everything we've discussed?
Honestly, I think employers who are still insisting on people being in the office 5 days a week are being really short-sighted. They're cutting themselves off from epic hires who won't even bother applying. And the best talent wants flexibility. If you can't offer it, you're shrinking your talent pool before you've even started. And then I'd also say to the people who are being told that they have to come back into the office, don't be afraid to push back and ask your employer for more flexibility. The old saying goes, you don't ask, you don't get. And if that does fail and you do ask and you don't get, don't be scared to look for something new. You might just find you're going to get a better deal somewhere else.
Yeah, I love that. Like advocate for self. And then if that's not working, there might be another amazing opportunity waiting for you. And what is the biggest game changer for you in terms of managing a life beyond career?
So for me, the biggest game changer has been giving myself permission to design work around my life, not the other way around. Once I stopped chasing that idea that ambition meant always being on, I found I could actually go further because I wasn't burning out. Having boundaries, carving out time for my kids and protecting space outside of work has made me show up stronger in my career and at home as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So true, right? And I think there's this fear about, okay, well, if we provide too much autonomy and trust, what does that do to outcomes? But actually you're saying we're all adults. I've got great autonomy and trust. I'm doing more in my outside of my life and I'm managing my life better. And now I'm performing better in work. So actually the package of autonomy, trust, flexibility is likely greater impact to your performance at work. And so what do you think the most important shift in the future of work is to create more space for the rhythms of life?
I think the biggest shift will and should be moving away from measuring time to measuring outcomes. As long as work is tied to butts in seats or hours online, people will always feel like they're choosing between life and career. We focus on impact instead. It frees people up to build a work schedule that actually works for them, whether that's parents around school pickup, caregivers, or just people who just want a life outside of work. That's the shift that's going to create real space for ambition and life to coexist.
Lovely. I love that advice and your thought leadership. What a lovely conversation. Thank you for being so honest and being so practical around what we can tangibly take away to improve and to build ambition and life together. So amazing conversation. So appreciate your time. Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, Karis. This was great.
Thanks for joining me on the Ambition and Life podcast. If today's conversation resonated, please follow, rate, or share it with someone charting their own path. If there's a conversation we need to have or a voice we need to hear, get in touch. Because none of us should have to choose between ambition and life. And when we share stories, we shape systems. Until next time, stay courageous, stay intentional, and keep designing a life that honours your ambition and your humanity.